I'm Selena, 19 years old, and currently drowning in student loans that I never thought I'd have to take. You see, my grandparents had set up a college fund for me when I was just a child. It was supposed to cover my education completely, but last year I discovered my parents had emptied it entirely to throw my sister Madison the sweet 16 party of the century. The betrayal cut deep, but what they didn't expect was how much they'd come to regret that decision. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you've ever experienced family financial betrayal or are worried about funding your education. Growing up in a modest neighborhood in Denver wasn't always easy, but it was home. Our house wasn't the biggest on the block, but it was comfortable enough for our family of 4, my mom, dad, my younger sister Madison, and me. What made my childhood special wasn't material possessions, but the unwavering presence of my grandparents in my life. My grandparents were everything to me. As first-generation immigrants from Italy, they had come to America with nothing but determination and hope for a better future. Grandpa Frank had worked in construction for 40 years, building his way up from a day laborer to owning a small but successful contracting business. Grandma Lucia had been a seamstress working long hours to help support the family while raising my father and his 2 siblings. Every weekend, I would eagerly wait for Saturday morning when Mom and Dad would drop me off at my grandparents' cozy brick house that smelled perpetually of fresh bread and homemade sauce. "Selena, my little scholar," Grandpa would announce as I walked through the door, swooping me up into a hug that smelled of aftershave and coffee. Those weekends were filled with cooking lessons from Grandma in her small but immaculate kitchen. "The secret is in the patience," she would tell me as we rolled out pasta dough together. "Just like education, it takes time, but the results are worth it." My hands would be coated in flour as she taught me family recipes passed down through generations. When I turned 8, my grandparents made an announcement that would shape my understanding of family love and commitment. We were all gathered in their dining room for Sunday dinner, a weekly tradition, when Grandpa tapped his fork against his water glass. "Your mother and I," he said, looking at my father, "have decided to set up a college fund for Selena. Education is the greatest gift we can give her, something no one can ever take away." I remember the pride in his voice, the way Grandma reached over to squeeze his hand, and the momentary flash of something, was it annoyance in my father's eyes before he quickly masked it with a smile. "That's very generous, Dad," my father said, his voice slightly tight. "But you know Sarah and I can provide for our kids." "Of course you can," Grandma interjected smoothly. "Think of this as our investment in Selena's future. We'll do the same for Madison when she's a little older." My parents accepted graciously on the surface, but later that night I overheard them talking in hushed, irritated tones about my grandparents overstepping and trying to control how we raise our children. Even at 8, I sensed the underlying tension, though I couldn't fully understand it. As years passed, the college fund grew steadily. Each birthday and Christmas, my grandparents would proudly tell me they'd added to my education savings. "Your brain is your most valuable asset, Selena," Grandpa would say. "We're just making sure you get the chance to use it to its full potential." Meanwhile, my relationship with Madison was becoming increasingly complicated. 3 years younger than me, Madison was a social butterfly from the start, pretty popular and painfully aware of it. Where I was reserved and academically focused, Madison thrived on attention, and my parents gave it to her abundantly. It wasn't that they ignored me completely. They attended my honor roll ceremonies and science competitions. They congratulated me when I was accepted into advanced placement classes. But there was always a sense that my achievements were expected, while Madison's C+ in math was cause for celebration and reward. "Your sister just isn't academically inclined like you are," Mom would explain when I questioned why Madison got a new phone for improving her grade from a D to a C+, while my straight A report card warranted only a good job and a pat on the shoulder. "We have to encourage her differently." By the time I reached high school, the pattern was firmly established. I excelled academically, earning recognition and small scholarships, while Madison became increasingly entitled, expecting and receiving lavish gifts for minimal effort. The summer before my senior year, I began to notice signs of financial strain in our household. Dad's manufacturing job had been cutting hours. Mom's part-time work at a local boutique wasn't bringing in much. Credit card statements would arrive and hushed arguments would follow. Yet somehow Madison's requests for expensive clothing, the latest electronics, and elaborate birthday parties never seemed to be denied. "We'll figure it out," I overheard Dad telling Mom after she expressed concern about the cost of Madison's designer jeans. "We can't let her be the only girl in her class without them." Through it all, my grandparents remained my rock, consistently reinforcing the value of education and hard work. They were the ones who helped me research colleges, who drove me to campus tours, who sat with me for hours as I worked on application essays. "Your college fund is looking healthy," Grandpa told me proudly as I narrowed down my university choices. "You focus on getting accepted where you want to go. The money will be there when you need it." I had no reason to doubt him. No reason to suspect that the safety net so carefully woven for me over the years was about to be ripped away by the very people who should have protected it most fiercely. The acceptance letter from Riverdale University arrived on a rainy Tuesday in April of my senior year. I'd been checking this mail obsessively for weeks, and when I saw the thick envelope with the university's emblem in the corner, my heart nearly stopped. I ripped it open right there in the driveway, rain soaking through my jacket as I read the words I'd been dreaming of. "We are pleased to offer you admission to Riverdale University's pre-medical program." I screamed so loudly that our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, came rushing out of her house thinking someone was hurt. Instead, she found me jumping up and down in puddles like a little kid waving my acceptance letter in the air. I got into Riverdale," I shouted, not caring that I was getting drenched or that Mrs. Patterson was staring at me like I'd lost my mind. Riverdale wasn't just any university. It boasted one of the top pre-med programs in the country with an impressive track record of graduates getting into top medical schools. The campus was only a few hours from home, far enough for independence, but close enough to visit my grandparents regularly. I called them first, of course. Grandma answered, and I could hear the smile in her voice as I shared my news. "Your grandpa and I never doubted you for a second, sweetheart," she said. "We're so proud we could burst. Come over for dinner tonight so we can celebrate properly." My parents were happy too in their way. Dad gave me a quick hug before heading back to the television, and Mom said, "That's wonderful news, honey. We knew you could do it," before asking if I'd seen Madison's math test that she'd gotten a B- on. That evening at my grandparents' house was magical. Grandma had prepared all my favorites: homemade lasagna, garlic bread, and tiramisu for dessert. Grandpa had bought sparkling cider so we could toast my success. "To our brilliant Selena," he said, raising his glass. "Future Dr. Williams and the first college graduate in our family." As we ate, we discussed the logistics. Riverdale's tuition wasn't cheap, but with the college fund my grandparents had been building for over a decade, plus the partial academic scholarship I'd earned, it would be manageable. "We'll meet with the financial aid office when we go for orientation next month," Grandma suggested. "Make sure everything is in order for your fall semester." June arrived quickly, and with it orientation day at Riverdale. I wore my nicest outfit, dark jeans, a blue blouse that brought out my eyes, and the pearl earrings my grandparents had given me for my 18th birthday. Mom had initially planned to come with me, but had backed out at the last minute because Madison had a dance recital the same day. So Grandma and Grandpa drove me instead. The campus was even more beautiful than I remembered from my tour. Red brick buildings with white columns sprawling green lawns, dotted with massive oak trees, students lounging in hammocks strung between branches. This would be my home for the next 4 years. The thought filled me with equal parts excitement and terror. Our appointment with the financial aid office was scheduled for 2 p.m. Ms. Garner, a kind-faced woman with silver-streaked hair, welcomed us warmly. "So you'll be joining our pre-med program," she noted, reviewing my file. "Excellent choice. Now let's talk about how you'll be financing your education." I explained about my scholarship and the college fund, expecting a straightforward conversation about disbursement schedules and paperwork. Instead, Ms. Garner's expression grew confused as she typed something into her computer. "I'm not seeing any indication of a college fund payment in our system," she said. "We have your FAFSA information and scholarship, but that leaves a significant gap in funding." My stomach dropped. "There must be some mistake," I said. "My grandparents set up a college fund for me years ago." Grandpa leaned forward. "There's definitely the fund," he confirmed. "It was set up through First National Bank. My daughter-in-law, Patricia Williams, is listed as a co-trustee until Selena turned 18, which was last year." Ms. Garner made a few calls, but the result was the same. No payment from any college fund had been initiated, and without it, I would be nearly $30,000 short for my first year alone. The drive home was tense, my grandparents trying to reassure me that there must be some misunderstanding while I fought back tears of confusion and panic. When we pulled up to my house, my parents' car was in the driveway, which was a relief. We would sort this out immediately. What I didn't expect was to walk in and find them surrounded by glossy brochures for party venues, caterers, and something called Sweet 16 Experience Planning. "Oh, you're back early," Mom said, not looking up from a brochure featuring a massive ice sculpture in the shape of the number 16. "How was orientation?" "There seems to be a problem with Selena's college fund," Grandma said before I could speak. "The financial aid office has no record of any payment, and Selena's first tuition installment is due in just 6 weeks. Dad and Mom exchanged a quick glance that made my heart sink even further. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where's my college fund?" There was a moment of heavy silence before Dad cleared his throat. "We've had to reallocate those funds temporarily," he said, his tone businesslike, as if he were discussing a minor budget adjustment and not my entire future. "Reallocate?" Grandpa's voice rose sharply. "What does that mean exactly?" Mom smiled brightly, too brightly. "Madison's Sweet 16 is coming up in August, and we've decided to do something really special for her. She's only going to turn 16 once, after all. You spent my college fund on Madison's birthday party." The words came out strangled, unbelievable, even as I said them. "Not all of it," Dad said quickly. "And it's not just any party. We've booked the Grand Plaza Hotel ballroom, hired a celebrity DJ, ordered a custom designer dress, and we're flying in Madison's favorite social media influencer for a meet and greet. It's an investment in her social development." "Social development?" Grandma echoed, her voice dangerously quiet. "Yes," Mom insisted. "Madison needs this. All the girls in her circle have spectacular Sweet 16s. We couldn't let her be the only one with a basic celebration." "And my education?" I asked, tears now flowing freely down my face. "What about my investment in that?" Dad waved a dismissive hand. "You got a scholarship, Selena, and you can take out loans like regular students do. Madison doesn't have your academic advantages. This party will give her the social boost she needs." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The fund that had been promised to me, that I had counted on, that represented years of my grandparents' hard work and sacrifice, had been emptied for a one-night party for my sister. Grandpa was shaking with anger. "That money was explicitly for Selena's education," he said. "You had no right." "We had every right," Mom interrupted. "Patricia was listed as a trustee. Legally, we could access those funds if needed." "For emergencies or for Selena's benefit," Grandma corrected. "Not for a party." "It is for Selena's benefit, indirectly," Dad argued weakly. "A happy family benefits everyone." I couldn't stand it anymore. I ran to my room and slammed the door, collapsing onto my bed in tears as the voices downstairs rose in volume. My college dreams, so close I could almost touch them, that morning now seemed impossibly distant. Later that night, after my grandparents had left with promises to figure something out, Madison bounced into my room without knocking as usual. "Did you see the party plans?" she asked excitedly, apparently oblivious to my red, swollen eyes. "It's going to be epic. We're even having a professional photographer and videographer to document everything." I just stared at her, unable to form words. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, frowning. "You should be happy for me." "They spent my college fund on your party," I finally managed to say. Madison's eyes widened momentarily, then she shrugged. "Oh, well, you're smart. You'll figure something out. I've got to go call Ashley and tell her about the chocolate fountain we're getting." As she flounced out, I turned to my laptop and began frantically researching student loans, part-time jobs near campus, and any additional scholarship opportunities still available. My dream couldn't end because of a Sweet 16 party. I wouldn't let it. August 12th. A date that should have been just another summer day became instead a monument to excess and a painful reminder of my parents' priorities. Madison's Sweet 16 celebration was everything they'd promised her, and more than I could have imagined in my worst nightmares. The Grand Plaza Hotel had transformed its ballroom into something that looked like it belonged in a royal palace. Crystal chandeliers reflected light onto walls draped with pale pink silk. Centerpieces of orchids and roses towered over tables dressed in linens that probably cost more than all my textbooks combined. A stage had been set up at the far end, complete with professional lighting and sound equipment for the celebrity DJ, some guy from a reality show who charged $5,000 for 2 hours. I stood in the corner wearing the dress my grandparents had bought me, simple but elegant navy blue with a modest neckline. Around me swirled girls from Madison's school in dresses that could have paid for a semester of my meal plan, boys in designer suits whose parents had clearly spared no expense, adults sipping champagne and commenting on how Patricia and Robert really outdid themselves. Madison made her entrance an hour after the party started, fashionably late, of course. She descended a specially constructed staircase in a custom-made gown that seemed to be composed entirely of crystals and tulle. It caught the light with every movement, sending rainbow reflections dancing across the walls. Her hair had been professionally styled, her makeup done by someone who usually worked with models. She looked beautiful, I had to admit. But at what cost? "Isn't this amazing?" A woman I recognized as one of Mom's friends gushed to me. "Your parents have given Madison such a special night. You must be so proud of your little sister." I forced my lips into something resembling a smile. "It's certainly extravagant," I replied, unable to bring myself to say more without crying or screaming or both. Across the room I spotted my grandparents. They had debated not coming at all, but ultimately decided their absence would only punish Madison for my parents' actions. Grandma wore a simple black dress, her only jewelry, the pearl necklace Grandpa had given her on their 50th anniversary. Grandpa stood stiffly in his best suit, his expression carefully neutral, as he watched the proceedings. As I made my way toward them, I overheard snippets of conversation from the parents of Madison's friends. "Must have cost a fortune. I heard they flew in that YouTuber from California just for tonight. The dress alone was supposedly $15,000. Catering is $40 per plate, and there must be 200 people here." Each comment was like a knife twisting in my gut. $15,000 for a dress she would wear once. $40 per plate for food that many teens wouldn't even eat. A YouTuber's appearance fee that could have covered my housing for a semester. "Try not to listen," Grandma murmured when I reached them, somehow reading my thoughts as she always could. "We're working on solutions, Selena. I promise you'll get to Riverdale. Your education matters more than this spectacle," Grandpa added quietly, his eyes scanning the opulent room with barely disguised disgust. The night proceeded in a blur of excess. A 5-tier cake wheeled out to applause, Madison opening presents that included designer handbags, jewelry, and even keys to a car she wouldn't be licensed to drive for months. The celebrity DJ playing songs with lyrics that made my grandparents wince. The social media influencer taking selfies with squealing teens who acted like they'd met royalty instead of someone famous for doing makeup tutorials online. And through it all, my parents beamed with pride, accepting compliments and congratulations as if they'd accomplished something truly significant. Rather than just spending money, they didn't have my money on a teenager's birthday party. When most of the guests had departed and only family and close friends remained, Madison was still riding the high of being the center of attention. She twirled in her crystal-encrusted gown, showing off for her remaining friends. "Best night ever," she exclaimed. "Mom, Dad, you guys are literally the greatest parents in the world." That was when Grandpa finally broke his silence. "Robert," he said, his voice carrying across the now half-empty ballroom. "Patricia, a word, please." My parents exchanged glances but followed Grandpa to a quiet corner. I trailed behind, not wanting to miss whatever he had to say. "What you've done here tonight is unconscionable," he began without preamble. "That fund was for Selena's future, her education, her chance at a career without crippling debt." "Dad, we've been through this," my father sighed. "Selena will be fine. She's got scholarships." "Partial scholarships," Grandma corrected sharply. "Not nearly enough to cover Riverdale's tuition, as you well know." "Madison needed this," Mom insisted. "You don't understand the social pressure girls her age face now. This party has secured her place." "Her place." Grandpa's voice rose slightly. "Her place as what the girl whose parents spent her sister's education fund on a party, because I guarantee you that's what people will remember when this night is long forgotten." Madison had wandered over, her face falling as she caught the tail end of the conversation. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between the adults. "Nothing, sweetie," Dad said quickly. "Grandpa just has some outdated ideas about reasonable spending." "Is it true?" Madison asked, her eyes finding mine. "Did they really use your college money for my party?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. Had she really not known, or had she just been conveniently ignoring the truth? "Yes," I answered simply. "The fund Grandma and Grandpa set up for me. It's gone now." Madison's eyes widened, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of something guilt shock. But it was quickly replaced by defensive anger. "Well, it's not my fault," she said, tossing her expensively styled hair. "I didn't ask them to use your money specifically." "No," Grandma agreed, her voice sad rather than angry. "You didn't. The responsibility lies with your parents, who should have known better." "Don't put this on us," Mom snapped. "We did what we thought was right for our family." for one member of your family," Grandpa corrected, "at the expense of another." The argument continued growing louder until Madison's remaining friends began to stare, humiliated and heartbroken. I slipped away and called a rideshare to take me to my grandparents' house. I couldn't spend another minute in that ballroom, couldn't bear to hear more justifications for what my parents had done. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the Grand Plaza Hotel with its elegant facade and twinkling lights. Inside those walls, tens of thousands of dollars my education, my future had been squandered on a single night of teenage glory, and somehow I was expected to just accept it and move on. But I couldn't, and as I would soon discover, the consequences of that night would extend far beyond my lost college fund. My parents had made their choice, prioritizing Madison's Sweet 16 over my education. They just didn't realize yet how much they would come to regret it. My first semester at Riverdale University was nothing like the college experience I had dreamed of. Instead of focusing on my pre-med courses and joining study groups, I was juggling 3 part-time jobs just to make ends meet. Thankfully, my grandparents had managed to scrape together enough for my first semester's tuition by liquidating some of their retirement investments, something I protested, but eventually accepted when they insisted. "Your education is more important than our comfort," Grandma had said firmly. "We can always postpone that Alaskan cruise we were planning." But even with their help, I still needed to cover books housing food and save for future semesters. So I worked at the campus coffee shop from 5 to 9 each morning, attended classes until 3, shelved books at the library until 7, then delivered food for a local restaurant until midnight. I slept 4 hours a night if I was lucky. My tiny dorm room was shared with a business major named Aisha, who watched me with increasing concern as the weeks passed and the dark circles under my eyes grew more pronounced. "You're going to crash if you keep this up," she warned one night as I stumbled in from my delivery job, barely able to keep my eyes open. "Pre-med is hard enough without working yourself to death." "Don't have a choice," I mumbled, collapsing onto my bed without even removing my shoes. "Gotta pay somehow." My grades, which had always been stellar, began to slip. Not dramatically at first, an A- instead of an A, a B+ on a paper I would normally have aced. But by midterms, the decline was becoming more serious. I bombed my organic chemistry exam after falling asleep halfway through it, earning my first C ever. Professor Larkin, my organic chemistry teacher, asked me to stay after class the following week. "Selena, I'm concerned," she said, her kind eyes studying my exhausted face. "Your work earlier in the semester showed real promise, but this exam was well below your capability. Is everything all right?" I tried to assure her that I was fine, just adjusting to college life, but the sympathetic look in her eyes broke down my defenses. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything: the college fund, Madison's Sweet 16, my 3 jobs, my 4 hours of sleep. "That's an impossible schedule," she said when I finished. "No wonder you're struggling. Have you spoken with the financial aid office about emergency assistance?" I nodded tiredly. "They offered an additional loan, but I'm already taking out so much. The interest alone will be crushing when I graduate." "And your parents, can they contribute anything now?" I let out a bitter laugh. "They're dealing with their own financial mess from the party, credit card debt mostly. They keep saying they'll help when things settle down, but that doesn't help me now." Professor Larkin recommended that I speak with my academic advisor about my options, including possibly reducing my course load. "It might take you longer to graduate," she acknowledged, "but better that than burning out completely." At home, things were even more strained. I had barely spoken to my parents since moving to campus, limiting our communication to brief text messages and obligatory calls on Sundays. Madison at least seemed to be developing some awareness of what had happened. Her texts had evolved from sharing social triumphs to occasionally asking how I was doing or if I needed anything. When Thanksgiving break arrived, I dreaded going home but couldn't afford to stay on campus. The dorms closed, and my part-time jobs wouldn't provide enough hours during the holiday. Grandma picked me up gasping when she saw me. "Selena, you've lost so much weight," she exclaimed, her hands gripping my shoulders. "Are you eating at all?" "When I have time," I admitted. "Ramen is cheap and quick." The drive to my parents' house was filled with her gentle inquiries and growing concern. "Maybe you should come live with us," she suggested. "Commute to Riverdale. At least you'd have proper meals and more sleep." "The commute would be over an hour each way," I reminded her. "I'd lose valuable study time." The moment we walked through my parents' front door, I knew something was different. The house, usually immaculately kept, looked slightly neglected. Mail was piled on the entryway table. The living room furniture had been rearranged, several pieces missing. "You're home." Mom emerged from the kitchen, attempting her usual brightness, but with a strain around her eyes I hadn't seen before. She moved to hug me, but I stepped back instinctively, still not ready for that level of reconciliation. "Where's the leather sectional?" I asked instead of returning her greeting. "Oh, we decided to redecorate a bit," she said vaguely. "How's school going?" Before I could answer, Madison came bounding down the stairs. She too looked different. Gone were the designer clothes she'd flaunted all summer, replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair, which had been professionally highlighted for her party, now showed dark roots. "Selena!" she exclaimed, wrapping me in a hug I didn't return. "You look awful," she added, pulling back to study my face. "Are you sick?" "Just tired," I replied flatly. "Working 3 jobs while taking a full course load will do that to you." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room, broken only when Grandma suggested I get settled in my old room. "You need to rest before dinner," she said firmly, shooting a reproachful look at my parents. Thanksgiving dinner was a tense affair. Extended family had been invited, aunts, uncles, cousins, creating an audience for the drama simmering just below the surface. Dad carved the turkey with forced joviality, while Mom fluttered around refilling water glasses and changing the subject whenever conversation veered too close to my college experience. It was my Aunt Lisa who finally broke the dam. "So, Selena, how are you liking Riverdale? Patricia mentioned you got a scholarship. That must be helping with costs." "The scholarship covers about 20%, I replied truthfully. "I'm working 3 jobs to try to cover the rest." Aunt Lisa frowned. "But what about that college fund Frank and Lucia set up? Didn't that help?" The table went silent. Mom froze water pitcher in hand. Dad suddenly became very interested in slicing more turkey that nobody needed. "The college fund was repurposed," I said, meeting my aunt's confused gaze steadily, "for Madison's Sweet 16 party last summer." The collective intake of breath around the table was audible. Aunt Lisa's eyes widened. Uncle Dave stopped mid-chew. My cousins exchanged glances. "Surely not the whole fund," Uncle Dave said, looking to my father for confirmation. "That was what, $60,000, $58,422. Grandpa supplied precisely, plus interest, every penny gone on a one-night party." Madison stared down at her plate, her face flushed with embarrassment. Mom's hands trembled as she set down the water pitcher. Dad cleared his throat several times but seemed unable to find words. "We made what we thought was the right decision at the time," Mom finally managed. "Madison needed a $60,000 party," Aunt Lisa interrupted incredulously. "No teenager needs that, Patricia. Good Lord." "It wasn't just the party," Dad tried to explain. "It was an investment in Madison's social—" "Robert, stop," Grandma said quietly but firmly. "You're only making it worse." The remainder of the meal passed in uncomfortable silence, broken only by requests to pass dishes and stilted attempts at safer topics. As soon as dessert was finished, relatives began making excuses to leave early. As Aunt Lisa hugged me goodbye, she slipped something into my hand, an envelope. "It's not much," she whispered, "but Dave and I want to help. You shouldn't have to work 3 jobs while studying medicine." Inside the envelope was a check for $5,000, a generous gift from an aunt and uncle who had 3 children of their own in college. I tried to refuse, but Aunt Lisa was insistent. "Family helps family," she said firmly. "Real help, not designer dresses and celebrity DJs." After the relatives had gone, I retreated to my room physically and emotionally exhausted. Around midnight, a soft knock at my door roused me from a restless sleep. It was Madison, her eyes red from crying. "Can I come in?" she asked hesitantly. I nodded, sitting up in bed as she perched awkwardly on my desk chair. "I didn't know," she said after a long silence. "About the college fund, I mean. I knew the party was expensive, but I thought Mom and Dad could afford it." "And now?" I asked. She bit her lip. "Now I know they couldn't. They're selling stuff, Selena. The sectional, Mom's designer bags, Dad's golf clubs. The credit card bills from my party are crushing them. And after what happened at dinner—" She trailed off, tears welling in her eyes again. "Now everyone knows," I finished for her. She nodded miserably. "All my friends thought it was the most amazing Sweet 16 ever, but none of them call anymore. The party's over, and suddenly, I'm not so interesting." Under different circumstances, I might have felt satisfaction at this development, But seeing my sister still just a child in many ways, confronting the hollowness of her social status and our parents' mistake, I felt only sadness. "It's not your fault," I said finally. "You didn't know where the money was coming from. Mom and Dad should have." Madison wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her pajama top. "I asked them for a car for Christmas," she admitted. "They told me we can't afford any big purchases for a long time. Dad said he might have to take a second job." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was working 3 jobs to pay for the education that should have been covered by my college fund, while my father contemplated a second job to pay off the debt from spending that very fund. "What can I do?" Madison asked suddenly, looking up at me with genuine concern. "To help you, I mean." The question caught me off guard. In all our years growing up together, Madison had rarely, if ever, considered my needs above her own. "Focus on school," I told her. "Don't waste your education. And maybe," I hesitated, not wanting to sound petty, "maybe remind Mom and Dad occasionally that my education matters too." She nodded solemnly, as if accepting a sacred mission. "I will. I promise." As she left, I realized that while Madison had enjoyed her Sweet 16 spectacle, perhaps the most valuable gift she'd received wasn't the designer dress or the celebrity appearances, but this harsh lesson in consequences and priorities. The next day, I received an email from Riverdale's financial aid office. My academic advisor had reported concern about my work-study balance, flagging me for intervention. The email outlined several emergency grant opportunities I might qualify for and invited me to schedule an appointment. It wasn't a solution to everything, but it was a start. As I packed to return to campus, I felt marginally more hopeful than when I'd arrived. But I had no idea that the true crisis and turning point was yet to come. December brought finals week, and with it the perfect storm of academic pressure, work obligations, and physical exhaustion. I hadn't had more than 3 consecutive hours of sleep in weeks. My diet consisted almost entirely of coffee and whatever free food I could grab during shifts at the campus cafe. My body was running on fumes, and deep down I knew something had to give. It happened during my biology final. I'd been studying for days, surviving on energy drinks, and determination confident I could at least pass despite my overwhelming schedule. Halfway through the exam, the words on the page began to swim before my eyes. I tried to focus, blinking hard and pressing my fingers against my temples. Then nothing. I woke up in the University Health Center with an IV in my arm and the concerned face of Dr. Patel, the campus physician, hovering above me. "Dehydration, exhaustion, and hypoglycemia," she said when she saw I was conscious. "Your body essentially shut down, Selena. When was the last time you ate a proper meal or slept more than 4 hours?" I couldn't remember which was answer enough. "Your professor called an ambulance when you collapsed," she continued. "You've been unconscious for 3 hours. 3 hours. My biology final." "My exam," I croaked, trying to sit up. "I need to finish." Dr. Patel gently pushed me back down. "Professor Hammond is aware of the situation. He said you can make up the exam when you're recovered. Right now, your health is the priority." She insisted on keeping me overnight for observation and contacted my emergency contacts, my parents. By evening, both they and my grandparents had arrived, creating a tense tableau around my hospital bed. Mom looked genuinely terrified, her normally perfect appearance disheveled, as if she'd rushed out without her usual preparations. Dad stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, his face ashen. Grandma had taken up position on one side of me, holding my hand and occasionally shooting reproachful glances at my parents, while Grandpa paced the small room, his worry manifesting as restless energy. "The doctor says you're working 3 jobs," Mom said, her voice small and unsure, "while taking a full pre-med course load." "That's correct," I replied, too tired to soften the reality. "Coffee shop mornings, library afternoons, food delivery nights, plus weekend shifts whenever I can get them." "But why?" Dad began, then stopped as he realized the absurdity of his question. We all knew why. "Your daughter is killing herself trying to pay for an education that should have been covered," Grandpa said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "This is the real cost of that Sweet 16 party, Robert. Not just dollars and cents, but Selena's health and well-being." "We never meant for this to happen," Mom whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "We thought she'd be fine with her scholarship and some loans. Everyone takes out loans for college." "Some loans, yes," Grandma agreed. "Not the crippling debt Selena is facing, and certainly not while working so many hours that she collapses during an exam." The conversation might have continued in this vein, recriminations and justifications bouncing back and forth over my hospital bed, if Madison hadn't chosen that moment to arrive. She burst through the door, having apparently run from the hospital entrance, her face flushed and tear-streaked. "Selena!" she cried, rushing to my bedside. "Are you okay? Dad just said you were in the hospital and we had to come right away." Seeing my little sister so genuinely distressed momentarily pushed aside my resentment. "I'm okay," I assured her. "Just exhausted and dehydrated. I fainted during my biology final." Madison turned to our parents, her expression morphing from concern to anger with startling speed. "This is because of my stupid party, isn't it?" she demanded. "Selena's working herself sick because you spent her college money on me." The baldness of her statement, spoken with the unfiltered directness of a 15-year-old, landed like a slap in the room. Dad flinched visibly. Mom's tears flowed faster. "Madison, honey, it's more complicated than that," Dad tried. "No, it isn't," she shot back. "I'm not a baby anymore. I know what happened. You took Selena's future and spent it on one night of showing off for my friends' friends who don't even talk to me anymore, by the way." Her words hung in the air, undeniable in their simple truth. For the first time, I saw real shame in my father's eyes, not just embarrassment or discomfort, but genuine soul-deep shame. "You're right," he said finally, his voice rough. "What we did was wrong, indefensible." He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps seeing for the first time the toll the past months had taken. "I'm so sorry, Selena. We should have protected your future, not sacrificed it." It was the apology I'd been waiting for, but now that it had arrived, I found I couldn't yet accept it. Words weren't enough, not after months of struggle, not while I lay in a hospital bed with an IV replacing the fluids my exhausted body had lacked. "I need more than sorry," I said quietly but firmly. "I need solutions. I can't keep going like this. I'll flunk out or worse." Grandpa stepped forward. "We've been discussing options," he said. "Your grandmother and I can help some, but not with everything." Mom wiped her tears, visibly pulling herself together. "We'll figure something out," she said, an echo of what she used to tell Dad when Madison wanted something expensive. But this time, the something was my education, not a designer handbag or party decoration. "How?" I pressed. "You're already in debt from the party. Madison said you're selling furniture to make ends meet." My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Dad nodded slightly, and Mom took a deep breath. "We can sell the house," she said. "Downsize to something smaller. The market in our neighborhood is good right now. We should have enough equity to pay off our debts and contribute significantly to your education." I stared at her, stunned. Our family home where I'd grown up, where all our memories were sacrificed to right their wrong. "That's drastic," I managed. "So is spending your entire college fund," Dad pointed out grimly. "Drastic problems require drastic solutions." Madison, who had been quiet during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "I want to help too," she said. "I'm quitting the dance team and getting a part-time job instead. The money can go to Selena's tuition." "Madison, no," I protested. "You don't have to. I want to," she insisted. "It's not fair that I got a $60,000 party and you can't even afford textbooks. Besides," she added with a small, sad smile, "dance team isn't fun anymore since all that Sweet 16 drama anyway." Dr. Patel returned, then checking my vitals and announcing that while I was improving, I would need to stay overnight and should take at least a week to rest completely before returning to any work or studies. "A week?" I panicked. "I can't miss that much work. I'll lose my jobs." "I'll speak with your employers," Grandma promised. "Explain the medical situation, and we'll talk to your professors about your finals." As the discussion continued around me, plans and adjustments and promises of support, I felt something shift inside me. The burden I'd been carrying alone for months was finally being shared. My collapse had forced a reckoning that my words alone couldn't achieve. That night, after everyone had gone and I was alone in the quiet hospital room, I realized that while my parents' regret couldn't undo the damage their decision had caused, it might be the foundation upon which we could build a new understanding. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps a path toward it. Morning brought discharge papers and a stern warning from Dr. Patel about self-care. It also brought my family back this time with practical plans rather than just apologies. Dad had already called a realtor about listing the house. Mom had appointments with financial advisors to restructure their debt and create a payment plan for my education. Madison had applied for 2 different after-school jobs. and my grandparents had spoken with the financial aid office about emergency assistance options. As I was wheeled out of the hospital, a precaution insisted upon by Dr. Patel, despite my protests that I could walk, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months' hope. Not that everything would be magically fixed, but that I was no longer fighting alone. The road ahead would still be difficult. Trust once broken takes time and consistent effort to rebuild. But as we drove away from the hospital, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps from this crisis, something stronger might eventually emerge. The winter break following my hospitalization became a turning point for our family. Instead of the usual holiday festivities, we focused on addressing the financial and emotional fallout from my parents' decision and my subsequent collapse. I spent the first week at my grandparents' house following doctor's orders to rest completely. No studying, no work, no stress. Grandma made sure I ate 3 proper meals a day, and for the first time in months, I slept 8 hours each night. By Christmas, some color had returned to my cheeks, and the perpetual headache I'd been ignoring had finally subsided. Meanwhile, my parents were taking concrete steps to address the situation they'd created. True to their word, they listed our family home, the 4-bedroom suburban house where I'd grown up with its spacious yard and finished basement. The realtor assured them that in the current market, they could expect to sell quickly and for a good price. Dad had taken on weekend work at a local hardware store to supplement his income while they waited for the house to sell. Mom had returned to full-time hours at the boutique and had started selling her designer clothes and accessories online. Madison, perhaps most surprisingly, had secured a job at the local library and was working 15 hours a week after school and on weekends. She'd also withdrawn from several expensive extracurricular activities, keeping only those that were low-cost or offered scholarships. But the most significant change was in our family dynamics. Madison had arranged what she solemnly called a family meeting a few days after Christmas. We gathered in my grandparents' living room, my parents perched uncomfortably on the sofa, Grandma and Grandpa in their usual armchairs, Madison standing nervously in the center, and me curled in the window seat. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Madison began, unusually serious for a 15-year-old, "about the Sweet 16 and Selena's college fund and everything that's happened since." She pulled out a small notebook where she'd apparently been jotting thoughts. "First, I want to say I'm sorry," she said, looking directly at me. "I didn't know where the money was coming from, but I should have questioned why we were suddenly able to afford such an extravagant party when we'd been cutting back on other things. I was selfish and caught up in social status." She turned to our parents. "Mom, Dad, I know you thought you were doing what was best for me, but the party wasn't worth it. The friends who came into my Sweet 16 hardly talk to me anymore. The dress is hanging in my closet never to be worn again. The videos and photos just make me feel guilty now." Mom started to speak, but Madison held up her hand. "Please let me finish. I've made some decisions." She consulted her notebook again. "I'm selling my designer clothes and electronics on the same sites Mom is using. I've already made about $800, which I want to contribute to Selena's tuition fund." I opened my mouth to protest, but she continued before I could speak. "I've also decided I don't want a car for my 16th birthday next year. Instead, I'd like whatever money would have gone toward that to go to Selena's education. And I'm applying for every scholarship I can find for my own college so that Mom and Dad can focus on helping Selena now." The room was silent when she finished. Madison, my little sister who had once thrown a tantrum over not getting the exact shade of pink for her bedroom walls, was voluntarily giving up material possessions and future gifts to help me. "That's very mature, Madison," Grandpa said, finally his voice gruff with emotion. "We're proud of you." "We are," Dad agreed, looking at his younger daughter with new respect. "But you don't have to give up everything. Your 16th birthday should still be special." Madison shrugged. "Maybe we could do something meaningful instead of expensive. Volunteer somewhere together as a family, or have a small dinner with people who actually care about me, not just the party." This suggestion, so different from the social media-worthy extravaganza she would have demanded a year ago, demonstrated how profoundly the experience had changed her. The family meeting continued with my parents presenting their financial plan. The house sale would allow them to pay off the credit card debt from Madison's party and contribute a significant amount to my education. They were downsizing to a small townhouse in a less prestigious neighborhood, which would reduce their monthly expenses considerably. "We've also made an appointment with a family therapist," Mom added, surprising me. The party was a symptom of deeper issues: our prioritization of image over substance, our different treatment of you and Madison over the years. We need to address all of that if we're going to heal as a family. For the first time since discovering the empty college fund, I felt a genuine willingness to work toward reconciliation. Not because their actions were excusable, they weren't, but because they were finally taking responsibility and making tangible sacrifices to address the harm they'd caused. January brought more positive developments. My academic advisor at Riverdale had worked with the administration to arrange a special hardship grant that covered 25% of my remaining tuition for the year. Professor Hammond, in whose class I'd collapsed, allowed me to retake the final exam without penalty, and the financial aid office helped me restructure my loans to reduce the immediate burden. I was able to drop the food delivery job, keeping only the coffee shop and library positions, which reduced my working hours from 40+ to a more manageable 25 per week. The difference in my stress levels and academic performance was immediate and dramatic. Our family home sold within 3 weeks of being listed for even more than the realtor had initially estimated. As promised, my parents used the proceeds to clear their debt and establish a new college fund for me, not as substantial as the original, but enough that combined with my scholarships and reduced work schedule, I could continue at Riverdale without risking another health crisis. The day they handed me the bank statement showing the new college account with my name on it and theirs noticeably absent from the authorized users felt like the closing of a painful chapter. The money couldn't erase the betrayal or the months of struggle, but it represented a tangible commitment to making things right. "We've learned our lesson the hard way," Dad said as I reviewed the statement. "Your education was always more important than any party or social status. We lost sight of that, and we're deeply sorry." "We can't change the past," Mom added, "but we can try to rebuild your trust going forward, one day at a time." By the time I returned to campus for the spring semester, our family was cautiously navigating a new normal. My parents and Madison had moved into the townhouse, donating or selling much of the furniture that wouldn't fit in the smaller space. Madison was thriving in her library job and had discovered a passion for organization and research that no one had suspected. And my grandparents, while still wary of my parents' judgment, were cautiously optimistic about the changes they were seeing. As for me, I approached the new semester with a mixture of hard-earned wisdom and cautious hope. The betrayal had changed me, made me more independent, more assertive about my needs, more careful about trusting others. But it had also shown me the capacity for growth and change in people I thought I knew completely. The road to forgiveness would be long, but for the first time I believed it might be possible to travel it together. 1 year after the discovery of my emptied college fund, I sat in my dorm room at Riverdale University, reflecting on how much had changed. The small desk calendar showed August 15th, exactly 1 year since Madison's infamous Sweet 16 party that had nearly derailed my education and irrevocably altered our family. My sophomore year was about to begin, and unlike the previous fall, I was facing it with optimism rather than dread. My class schedule was challenging but manageable. I had scaled back to just one part-time job at the campus library, which gave me enough income for personal expenses while leaving time for proper studying and even occasional social activities. Most importantly, my tuition was secure through a combination of scholarship money, the new fund my parents had established, and continued support from my grandparents. The physical changes were obvious to anyone who knew me. The gaunt, exhausted girl from last year's ID photo had been replaced by a healthy young woman with clear eyes and energy to spare. But the internal transformation was even more profound. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Aisha, my roommate from freshman year, who had become one of my closest friends. "Ready for the welcome dinner?" she asked, poking her head in. "They're serving actual edible food tonight, allegedly." "Just finishing up," I replied, closing the journal where I'd been recording my reflections. "Hard to believe it's been a year already." "A lot can change in a year," she observed, settling onto the edge of my bed. "Remember how you used to come back from delivering food at midnight and pass out with your shoes still on?" I laughed. "Not my finest moments. And now look at you, health-restored grades, back up only working reasonable hours. A proper college student instead of a zombie." She wasn't exaggerating. My GPA had recovered after the disastrous first semester, and I'd even made the dean's list in the spring. Professor Larkin had recommended me for an undergraduate research position in the biology department for the coming year, a prestigious opportunity that would strengthen my eventual medical school applications. "Have you heard from your family today?" Aisha asked, knowing the significance of the date. I nodded. Mom called this morning. They're doing well in the townhouse, finally finished decorating last week. Dad got a promotion at work. And Madison? I smiled, thinking of my sister's latest update. Madison just got elected president of her school's community service club. Can you believe it? The girl who once needed a celebrity appearance at her birthday party is now organizing volunteer work at homeless shelters. People can surprise you, Aisha said thoughtfully. They really can, I agreed. The changes in my sister over the past year had been perhaps the most unexpected development of all. The entitled social media-obsessed teen had transformed into a thoughtful young woman with genuine concern for others. Her part-time job at the library had evolved into a true passion for books and learning, and her grades had improved dramatically as a result. More importantly, our relationship had deepened beyond anything I would have thought possible. The shared experience of our parents' mistake and its aftermath had forged a bond between us that transcended our previous superficial interactions. We texted daily now, sharing both triumphs and challenges, offering each other the kind of supportive sisterhood I'd always longed for, but never expected to have. My parents, too, had undergone significant changes. The family therapy sessions they'd initiated had unearthed years of problematic patterns, their different treatment of Madison and me, their prioritization of appearance over substance, their tendency to use material things to express love or solve problems. They were working on these issues diligently, with varying degrees of success. There were still occasional missteps, like when Mom suggested buying me an expensive laptop to make up for everything, instead of simply asking what I needed. But the important difference was their willingness to recognize these patterns and correct course when they emerged. The smaller townhouse had necessitated a simpler lifestyle that somewhat surprisingly seemed to suit them. Dad spoke of feeling unburdened after selling so many possessions they'd accumulated over the years. Mom had discovered a talent for thrift store fashion that she now showcased on a small but growing social media account dedicated to budget style. Most significantly, they had followed through on their financial commitments to my education. Each month, without fail, they deposited money into my new college fund, sometimes more than promised if Dad received a bonus or Mom had a particularly good month of sales. These consistent actions spoke louder than any words of apology could have. My grandparents, those steadfast pillars of wisdom and integrity, had gradually moved from righteous anger to cautious acceptance of my parents' efforts to make amends. Sunday dinners had resumed at their house, no longer tense affairs, but genuine family gatherings where healing continued through shared meals and honest conversation. "We should get going," Aisha said, glancing at her watch. "You know how quickly the good desserts disappear." As we walked across campus toward the dining hall, the setting sun bathed the red brick buildings in golden light. Students lounged on the quad, laughing and reconnecting after the summer break. Professors strolled along the paths, greeting returning students with warm smiles. The scene was exactly what I had imagined college would be when I'd first received my acceptance letter, before the betrayal, before the struggle, before the collapse. "Penny for your thoughts," Aisha asked, noticing my contemplative mood. "I was just thinking about forgiveness," I replied, "how it's not a single moment but a process, and how it doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the hurt never happened." "Deep thoughts for a welcome dinner," she teased gently. I smiled. The past year has made me philosophical, I guess. The truth was, I had spent months grappling with forgiveness, what it meant, what it required, whether my parents deserved it. I had moved gradually from raw hurt to smoldering anger to reluctant understanding, and finally to a place of acceptance that allowed for rebuilding without erasing the reality of what had happened. I had learned that forgiveness isn't about declaring all is forgotten or that no harm was done. Rather, it's about choosing not to let the injury define every aspect of the relationship moving forward. It's about creating space for growth and redemption while still honoring the legitimate pain that occurred. My parents had emptied my college fund for Madison's Sweet 16 party. That fact would never change. The decision had reflected profound problems in their values, priorities, and parenting. The consequences had been severe for all of us, most directly for me, as I struggled to finance my education. But from that terrible mistake had come valuable lessons that had transformed our family. Madison had developed empathy and perspective that might otherwise have taken years to emerge. My parents had confronted their misplaced priorities and were working to align their actions with healthier values. And I had discovered strength, resilience, and self-advocacy I hadn't known I possessed. As we entered the dining hall, I was greeted by several professors who remembered me from freshman year. Professor Hammond, in whose class I had collapsed, seemed particularly pleased to see me looking healthy and energized. "Ms. Williams, wonderful to see you back on campus," he said warmly. "I've been looking forward to having you in advanced cellular biology this semester." "Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to it too," I replied, genuinely meaning it. The thought of challenging courses no longer filled me with dread now that I had the time and energy to properly engage with them. After dinner, as Aisha and I walked back to our dorm in the soft summer twilight, I felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over me. Not for what had happened, the betrayal still stung when I allowed myself to dwell on it, but for what had emerged from the wreckage: stronger relationships, clearer priorities, and a family committed to healing together. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "Hope your welcome dinner was good. Dad made his famous lasagna tonight, but it wasn't as good as Grandma's. Miss you tons. Call tomorrow." I smiled and typed back, "Dinner was great. Definitely call tomorrow. Tell Dad to add more basil next time. Love you." Such a simple exchange, yet so different from our communication a year ago. No jealousy, no competition, no superficial updates about social status or material acquisitions, just genuine connection between sisters who had learned the hard way what truly matters. As I reached my dorm room and prepared for the first day of classes tomorrow, I thought about the lessons I would carry forward from this experience, that true wealth comes not from what you own, but from integrity and trust. That standing up for yourself doesn't preclude allowing people the space to grow and change. That family bonds, when tested and even broken, can be rewoven into something different, but perhaps stronger than before. And that sometimes our hardest challenges become our greatest teachers if we're willing to learn from them. My parents had emptied my college fund to buy my sister a sweet 16 party. They had come to regret it deeply, not just because of the financial consequences, but because of the values that decision had revealed. Their regret had led to genuine change, not perfect, not complete, but real and ongoing. And in the end, perhaps that was the most valuable education of all. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that turned into a valuable life lesson? How did you handle the journey toward forgiveness? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And share this video with someone who might be struggling with family financial issues or the complex path of forgiveness. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest sources of wisdom.